If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, Christianity collapses. The cross becomes nothing more than a tragedy. Salvation becomes a beautiful metaphor, and your faith, well, it becomes nothing more than a comforting story. But if Jesus did rise from the dead, then death is defeated. Sin absolutely conquered. And everything that Jesus said is true. So we're here to ask the real question. Did Jesus actually rise from the dead? Or is it all just some story that the Christians tell themselves? Let's talk about it.
How do you know that in the other God is real?
Welcome to Gospel Grounded, where we grow together from spiritual milk to spiritual meat. My name is Webster, and I have the blessing, the honor, and the absolute privilege of being your host for as long as God will bless this ministry. Today, we are tackling the claim that changed human history forever: the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We are not going to be looking at legends. We're not going to be looking at feelings. No, we're going to be looking at the historical, the biblical, and the straight up logical evidence for the resurrection. Because here's the thing, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, Paul says that our faith is in vain. But if he did, then everything changes. Let's dive in. This is important because the resurrection, it's not just some bonus miracle. It's the foundation of Christianity. If you look at 1 Corinthians 15 verse 14, it says, "And if Christ is not risen, then our preaching is empty, and your faith is also empty." In other words, if there's no resurrection, then there is no Christianity. So this, my friend, is why we need to ask ourselves, if we're intellectually honest, what actually happened that Sunday morning? Now, you probably know one of the most popular objections online for the resurrection of Jesus. People love to say, well, Jesus didn't actually rise because, well, he never really died. As if that's some kind of mic drop. But let's break this down, because if this is your objection, then you need to deal with the fact that firstly, the Romans were experts at unaliving people. They had absolutely perfected crucifixion, and those entrusted with the practice, they didn't make mistakes, my friend. And then you need to deal with the fact that Jesus was stabbed in the side. And in the Gospels, we read that when this happened, water and blood flowed out. This water and blood flowing out was most likely pleural effusion or pericardial effusion, which is medical evidence of death. And of course, you got to deal with the fact that he was wrapped, he was buried, he was in a tomb that was sealed, and the tomb was guarded. If he was never really dead in the first place, my friend, why guard and seal the tomb? That doesn't make sense. You know the rules, man. Screw what I say. What do the smart people say? William Lane Craig, who is the leading resurrection scholar alive today, says, "The historical evidence for the resurrection is so strong that no scholar can explain it away without adopting theories that are more implausible than the resurrection itself." Let me translate that for you real quick. If Jesus didn't die, then you need to rely on a miracle greater than the resurrection to explain all of it. Good luck. Then other people say, well, maybe the disciples stole the body. Love this one. And it goes way back to Matthew 28, when the Pharisees basically bribed the guards to say this. But think about this critically for a second. Roman guards faced execution for failure. And with that in mind, you mean to tell me that a ragtag group of dudes who just got the surprise of their lives somehow snuck past trained professionals, stole a body, and left unscathed? Yeah. Which brings me to my next point. The disciples were absolutely terrified, and they were actually hiding. You need to understand that the fact is that these guys were not in Mission Impossible mode. There's absolutely no way that they could have pulled off this kind of heist. But then you need to address the elephant in the room. A stolen body just doesn't explain the appearances. Even with an empty tomb, you still have to explain all of the encounters. You know what? I'm just some dude who reads his Bible. What do the smart people say? Bart Ehrman says, we can say with complete certainty that some of Jesus' disciples at some later time insisted that he soon appeared to them. Why does it matter what Bart Ehrman says? Well, firstly, he's smart, but secondly, Ehrman's an agnostic. He doesn't even believe in the resurrection, but he admits that the disciples genuinely believed Jesus appeared to them. That alone kills the stolen body theory. And to deal with this, people came up with one of my absolute favorite objections. You might have heard people say this. They're like, you know what? I bet the disciples were just hallucinating. Bro, hallucinations are individual. They're internal, as in your own brain. They are non-physical. They're not shared, and they're not interactive. But Jesus, my friend, Jesus, he appeared to Mary, he appeared to the disciples, he appeared to the two men on the road, he appeared to Thomas, he appeared to 500 people at once, he appeared to his unbelieving brother James, and he appeared to Paul, who was his enemy. Come on. Hallucinations, they don't cook, they don't eat breakfast, but Jesus did. Hallucinations aren't like, bro, I got scars, come touch them. But Jesus, he let him touch the scars. But I can hear you all in the back already. You already don't believe me. You're lining up a bunch of further objections. So let's do it. What do the smart people say? N.T. Wright said the early Christians did not invent the empty tomb and the meetings or sightings of the risen Jesus. Nobody was expecting this kind of thing. Now, N.T. Wright is one of the world's top historians on early Christians and early Christianity, and he insists that the resurrection appearances were unexpected, and because they were unexpected, that proves that they really probably, most likely, were not fabricated. So what do we know? We know that Jesus really was unalived. That, my friend, is one of the best attested events in ancient history. You can't get around that. Second thing we know is that Jesus's tomb was actually empty. My friend, even the non-Christians admit that. Stop playing. The third thing we know is that a whole bunch of people saw him alive after his death. And that list of people includes skeptics like his brother James, who didn't even believe that Jesus was who he said he was, and his enemies like Paul, who went around unaliving Christians for fun. Yeah, it was the best of times and truly the worst of times. And the fourth thing that we know is that the disciples were completely transformed after seeing the risen Jesus. I'm talking straight up cowards, like Peter had just denied even knowing Jesus. Yeah, cowards from that to martyrs and being ready to really go to the grave for this, virtually overnight. How do you explain that? And here's the thing. The early church didn't see the resurrection as a metaphor. They saw it as a historical event that exploded everything and reshaped reality, reshaped history. Athanasius, once speaking about Jesus, said his death is the life of all, and through his death, the corruption due to all man has come to an end. That, my friend, were the words of the early church. The resurrection of Jesus, it's not new, bro. I know. I jumped the gun. What do the smart people say? Here's one more from C.S. Lewis. He says that Christ's resurrection was the first event of its kind in the whole history of the universe. What's the Webster translation? This event, the resurrection, it wasn't a myth, it wasn't some hallucination. This was a cosmic intrusion. This was the moment death itself began to work backwards. Quite frankly, this was an act of God. If Jesus rose from the dead, then what that means is that your sins can truly be forgiven. It means that death is not the end. It means that Jesus is exactly who he claimed to be, and you, my friend, can have new life. You see, the resurrection, it's not just about ancient history. It's the power that rewrites your present and secures your entire eternity. So, did Jesus really rise from the dead? In my view, the evidence says yes. History says yes. The disciples, they said yes. The empty tomb, it definitely says yes. But here's the next question. What actually happens after we die? Is it heaven? Is it hell? Judgment? Eternity? That, my friend, is a great question. And that, my friend, is our next video. Subscribe so you don't miss out. God bless you.